In this video, I built a house without moving. In order to build this house, I was going to need to collect this list of items. This would involve me having to travel to a lot of different locations all over the world. This meant that the W, A, S and D keys on my keyboard done nothing. I also was unable to jump. My first problem was obvious. How was I going to move? Luckily, I started on top of a tree, so I chopped it down, and just like the Ottomans did in the conquest of Constantinople of 1453, my plan involved using boats on land. In order to move, I could simply get into and out of the boat. I managed to trap some sheep in the boat so that I could get the wool, and using the flowers I collected, I dyed all of the wool pink. This allowed me to make a bed, which I needed because I would not survive long during the night if I couldn't move, which I can't. I solved the problem of not being able to move. Now I had to figure out a way to move quicker. I had a plan for this, and it would involve finding a village. Luckily, it didn't take long to find one, and as a bonus, I was able to collect the wheat and turn it into bread. I also found a cave the zombies kept emerging from, and I got an iron shovel from one of them. I decided to return to this later and investigate it. The village had a leather worker, and that was good news for the plan. I also got some bread and leather armour from the chest. Now I needed to go to the farm so that I could get a carrot. This was step 1 of the plan done. Step 2 of the plan was to obtain a fishing rod. This could be done by trading with a fisherman, so I gave that job to one of the villagers. I then went and made sure the leather worker had easier access to a cauldron. The reason I needed a leather worker was so that I could get a saddle. This was step 3. Now seemed like a good time to go back and have a better look at the cave with all the zombies. Through a second opening of the cave, I spotted a zombie spawner, which would explain all of the zombies. I made my way down to have a closer look, and in the chests, I found a few different items, but the most important was the string, because I could now craft a fishing rod. Now that I didn't have to trade with a fisherman, I thought that a career change was needed for the villager who had formerly been a fisherman. I gave them the job of a fletcher. It was now time to put all of the parts of the plan together. I now had a new friend, and they were going to help me travel around the world collecting all of the materials that I needed to build the house. I decided to call them Keyboard because they were going to be my way of moving around this world. I decided the best place to start was collecting some honeycomb from the naturally spawned bee nests so that I could build a farm. I was going to need a good amount of honeycomb to craft all of the beehives that I needed for the house. I decided that a nice place to build the house was back where I started this challenge. While the beehives were producing honeycomb, I went and had a quick look around the area and found a second village. This will be useful later in the challenge. I also chopped down some trees in the forest next to the farm. After that, it didn't take long for me to gather the rest of the honeycomb, and I was able to make all of the beehives that I needed. It was now time to move on to the next items on the list. I needed to collect some red tulips, pink tulips, lilies of the valley, orange tulips, and blue orchids. All of which, except the blue orchids, I could get from a flower forest, so I decided to get the blue orchids later. I returned back with all of the flowers I had collected and left them in a chest. Just like that, I had 5 of the items I was going to need to build a house. Then I had to go and travel and find some spruce trees for a number of different items. On my way, I found a ruined nether portal that had some iron nuggets in the chest. I met the second biggest obstacle of this challenge, how to go across water. In this case, I had to get to the other side of the river, and since I would have to cross the river a number of times, I decided to build a bridge. I used boats to cross the river while building the bridge. On the other side of the river was a hill, and when I got over the hill, I found a second river, so I had to build a second bridge. After crossing the second river, I climbed up the hill and went through a forest before finally arriving at a patch of spruce trees. I chopped down all of the spruce and also some more that I found not too far away from where I was. I then returned home and crafted all of the spruce related items, in addition to the barrels and the ladders. I was able to get the stripped oak logs and the wood needed to make the slabs, trapdoors and stairs from the neighbouring forest. I then went back to where I got some of the spruce logs and collected the gravel I needed to make the white concrete, and also while I was there I mined the granite that I needed. I was able to get sand from a beach that was close to where I was going to build a house. I then returned to the Honeycomb farm and using the bones I got from the zombie spawner and some lilies of the valley, I was able to craft white dye which I used for the white concrete. Going over to the spot next to the Honeycomb farm, I placed down some water and converted the concrete powder into concrete. I was now halfway through my list of blocks that I needed to get. Now was time for me to find one of the more difficult blocks of this challenge, a moss block. My first thought was to find one in a shipwreck, but this would be dangerous because it would involve going into an open body of water and I can't swim. So I went back to the beach that I got the sand from and found a shipwreck floating above the water. Brilliant, I thought. This should be easy. It wasn't. I used the boats to get close to the shipwreck like I did when building the bridge across the rivers, but I misjudged the distance between the boats and ended up getting off of the boat with no way to get on to the second boat. Luckily, the keyboard was right beside me, so I got on them and tried to reach the boat, but when I got off, I was knocked back and slowly sank to the bottom of the water. I was able to use my water bucket to breathe under the water while I thought of a plan. The plan I thought of was to dig down under the water and tunnel my way back to the shore. In order to move, I dug holes in the roof of the tunnel. This allowed the water to flow down and push me along. While digging my way back to the shore, my pickaxe broke and I left the items that I would have needed to make a new one back at the shore. The reason I left my stuff in a chest on the shore was so that if I didn't make it, all of my stuff wouldn't despawn. So now I had to break all of the stone with my fist, but despite that, I eventually got back to the shore where I was able to make a new pickaxe, and also I took the items that I needed to make a new pickaxe in case that one broke, so that the same thing wouldn't happen again. I went to the edge of the water and tried to make it to the ship again, because I still needed to find a moss block and more importantly, reunite with keyboard. I got back to the shipwreck and in one of the chests was some iron, which is still useful, and in the second a treasure map, which meant I still needed to find a moss block. On my way back to the shore, it happened again. I misplaced the boat. Luckily, keyboard was right next to me, and with their help, I reached the boat. After that, I decided to stay away from deep water for now and move on to collecting clay. I made sure to only get clay from shallow water and placed the boat near me so that I could easily get back to the surface. This plan worked out great and I was able to quickly get all of the clay that I needed. The reason I needed all of the clay was so that I could make some bricks. I placed down a few furnaces next to a lava pool I found and waited for the clay to turn into bricks. Once they were done, I crafted a stone cutter and made the stairs that I also needed. I was 2 items closer to being done with the list. I decided now was a good time to collect some of the easier items, with those being the mud related items. I placed down a large amount of dirt, turned it all into mud using bottles of water, and then dug it all up. I still needed some more mud, so I turned the dirt under the original layer of mud into mud and grabbed it as well. I then went back to the village that I found while getting the honeycomb earlier in this challenge. I got the wheat and used that to make the packed mud, which I can turn into mud bricks. I also mined up a bit of iron that I found, which I've been doing throughout this whole challenge because I was going to need it to craft lanterns. I crafted all of the mud related items and also made the coarse dirt using the dirt and gravel. I then crafted some, but not all of the lanterns I would need, so I couldn't count it as complete yet. I also made the white stained glass panes. I decided it was a good time to go underground and get the deep slate that I needed. I thought that the best idea was to avoid any caves, so I dug a path down to deep slate. I had to make sure the path was big enough for me to travel down with keyboard. I also got some more iron while I was down there and used it to make more lanterns, but I still needed more. I now only needed to get 5 more items before I could start building the house. In order to get the bamboo to make the bamboo trapdoors, I had to go on one of the longest journeys of this challenge so that I could find a jungle. Once I reached the jungle, I started looking for some bamboo, but unfortunately, I was unable to find a bamboo forest. So I simply grabbed what I could find and returned back to where I was planning on building the house. I planted the bamboo that I got from the jungle and waited for it to grow. Once it grew, I chopped it down and crafted the bamboo trapdoors. I was now one item closer to being done. Needing more iron to make lanterns, I headed to the original village and waited on top of a pillar for an iron golem to come close enough to me so that I could attack it and get the iron that way. I was slightly short on the amount of iron I required, and I also still needed to get some moss blocks, so I decided to try my luck with the shipwrecks again. I found a shipwreck, but this one will be harder to get to than the last one because it was completely submerged in the water. I made my way out towards it, and using some kelp I was able to build a wooden platform in the middle of the water. I was then able to slowly drain away the water as I built down towards the shipwreck. The plan was working perfectly until I broke a block from underneath me and sank down through a hole in the ship. Like last time, I used the bucket I had to help me breathe, and I also looked in the chest that I was next to and found the iron that I was looking for, but still no moss blocks. I didn't want to build a tunnel under the water like I did the last time I was in a situation like this, so I built a room around me and drained the water from it. I then used water to push me up a stair that I got from the ship, and before long I was back up at the surface. I quickly made my way back to the safety of the land. After some more looking around, I found another shipwreck, and this time it was above the water, so I had a quick look in the chests and found even more iron, but still no moss blocks. While I was wandering around, I found an azalea tree, which meant there was a lush cave underneath me where I would be able to find some moss blocks. I started to dig down, making sure to follow the rooted dirt, which I also needed for the house. The moss was underwater, so I drained the water and collected moss. I then returned to the surface and went back to the area where I was going to build a house, so that I could make some bone meal using the wheat and the composter. I also finally crafted all of the lanterns that I would need, so I marked it and the rooted dirt off the list and went to an area where I could use the bone meal to grow more moss. I left the moss in a chest, marked it off the list, and then went on another long journey in order to find a swamp so that I could get the last item on the list, the blue orchids. I spotted a swamp in the distance and crossed the water with the help of keyboard. Once at the swamp, I collected the blue orchids and made my way back home again. And with that, I finally had every item that I needed to build a house. Before I could start building the house, I needed to get some leaves so that I could make even more bone meal, and also flatten the ground where I was going to build a house. Using spruce saplings, I was able to convert the grass into podzol, which I needed for building the house. It did mean that I had to chop down a massive tree, which was a bit of an inconvenience, but with that all done, I was able to start building the house. I did it. I built the house, and included in the house was a pen for keyboard. It had some carrots growing and also some mud, so they can relax after the adventure we had together. I made my way to the other part of the house, and that was it. The challenge was complete. Thank you for watching.